My good friend, Rabbi Michael Holzman, believes that American democracy is going to be saved by synagogues and churches and mosques and community centers and clubs and other local affinity groups in which people have to figure out how to get along and make decisions and navigate a world that is changing day by day, sometimes second by second. He believes that if we can build community in here that is safe and healthy and thriving and strong and open-minded and values-driven and inspiring and chock full of disagreement, then we can learn to do it out there. As many of you know, I spent 18 years as a rabbi in Arizona. I loved that community very dearly, and I had to be very, very deliberate about what I said from the bima. The congregation had a liberal majority and a serious multiplicity of opinions. I didn't censor myself, but I crafted every sentence, sometimes every word. I spent hours working through my thoughts in order to find the very precise and nuanced point that I wanted to make. I didn't add even a breath of rhetoric that I couldn't defend, because I would surely find myself defending every single word. There were times when this was infuriating. On the other hand, I was deeply proud of those skills that I was forced to develop. When I spoke out on a topic that was controversial, my goal was to hold my ground, to say what I needed to say, and to do so in a way that if someone disagreed with me, they would still call me the next day if they needed a rabbi to do a funeral. We're supposed to be able to disagree, right? The Bible has a vision for how that works. It says, just as iron sharpens iron, so a person sharpens the wit of their friend. Our opinions collide. We shape ourselves against each other. Maybe we even wear ourselves down a bit. And there's a purpose to that exchange. We emerge more refined, more precise, better. The Talmud elaborates that this teaching applies to Torah scholars who have fierce disputes. They also have intense and lasting relationships. That's what I learned to do in Arizona. And I'm worried that we're losing that capacity, our ability to sharpen one another, and our willingness to be sharpened. Our democracy depends on it, just as surely as it depends on fairness, access, and broad participation. Let's back up and talk about that for a minute. We'll come back to the interpersonal, which is what I really want to talk about today. But I can't address democracy without making a few comments about our larger landscape. There are those who seek to consolidate and manipulate the power that truly belongs to the people. The hundreds of anti-voting bills introduced in recent years in states are antithetical to the Talmud's teaching that one must have the consent of the community in order to appoint a leader. They are antithetical to the hard-won victories of America's past 150 years. The trend has been and must be increasing access to voting, not decreasing. Also, its fairness and its impact. Think about women's suffrage, voting rights, civil rights, and direct election of senators. That trajectory makes any effort at voter suppression both frightening and offensive. I hope you'll join the Social Justice Symposium on October 19th on this very topic. Equally disturbing is the fact that our representative government is becoming less and less representative. Some of this was written into the Constitution intentionally when framers were struggling with a different set of issues around fairness. But in today's world, the Electoral College, the nature of the Senate, and the frozen number of representatives in the House, they were once the solution, and they're now the problem. Among the many ways in which we are polarized, we are becoming increasingly separated geographically. It is predicted that as people move to more populous states, by 2040, about 70% of Americans will have only 30 senators representing them, while the remaining 30% will have 70. Add to that a willingness to defy convention and cast off decency in confirming Supreme Justices, court justices. I gotta slow down, I'm nervous. Okay, slow down. Add to that what's going on in the Supreme Court, and you end up with a lot of extremely powerful people with no accountability to the public. And not surprisingly, those who have been underrepresented throughout American history only stand to become more disenfranchised. And those who benefit from this imbalance have been and will be vehemently opposed to measures that would correct it. We've got to take this on. But here's the thing. It's the High Holy Days. We can't show up today only to talk about what somebody else is doing wrong. It would be absurd to come back 10 days from now on Yom Kippur to confess, you sinned, you erred, you made mistakes. Or even, frankly, they sinned, they erred, they made mistakes. We have to look at our side of the street. We have to admit that we too are part of a deeply broken system, and there are ways in which we benefit from it. We will participate as the country addresses our democracy problem on the national level. We'll have some soul searching to do. But what I want to talk about today is the work that we can do right here, in these seats, on the human being to human being level, where we have a polarization problem. Writer and mediator Amanda Ripley distinguishes between good conflict and high conflict. In good conflict, there is a useful friction, she writes. It's a force that pushes us to be better people. Good conflict has nothing to do with surrender. It can be stressful and heated, but our dignity remains intact. Good conflict does not collapse into caricature. We remain open to the reality that none of us has the answers to everything all of the time. In high conflict, the normal rules of engagement no longer apply. Each conflict with the other side becomes more charged. The brain behaves differently. We feel increasingly certain of our own superiority, and at the same time, more and more mystified by the other side. Sound maybe a little bit familiar? There's reason to be mystified and indignant, but could we learn to keep it on this side of contempt and scorn? There are limits, to be sure. No one is required to stay in relationship with someone who is cruel, oppressive, or denies their rights. But as Micha Goodman teaches, a polarized world is a world that has lost its curiosity. Could we regain some curiosity? The goal of good conflict is not to capitulate or compromise, but rather to become capable of comprehending that with which we still disagree. That is the very reason the Talmud gives that the arguments of the school of Hillel nearly always prevail over the arguments of the school of Shammai. These were two opposing thought leaders who set policy in their time. Why did the school of Hillel prevail? Because they were agreeable, forbearing, and could teach the opposing arguments as well as they could teach their own, maybe even better. The Talmud doesn't tell us if it praises that approach because it is kind, decent, and relational, or because it's simply pragmatic. As Amanda Ripley explains, one paradox of resolving high conflict is that no one will change in the ways you want them to until they believe you understand and accept them for who they are right now. That is a paradox. One way to potentially, eventually, win an argument is to try not winning. No one will change the way you want them to until they believe that you understand and accept them for who they are right now. Michael Marmer teaches that the angel of learning and the angel of victory cannot be in the same room at the same time. You have to decide which one you're going to invite in. There are times for victory, and there are times for learning and shared humanity and seeing the struggles of the other side, which we're not going to get on cable news or Instagram or Twitter. We're only going to get it by looking into each other's eyes, telling our stories, and listening. That's where the synagogue comes in. I don't want us to talk about the High Holy Days. I want us to do the High Holy Days, which means going inside, stretching, thinking and feeling the things that are hard to think and feel. I'm inviting you to spend a few hours during these weeks reading with me the stories of two synagogues that are deeply dedicated to good conflict. I don't yet have a grand plan for how we'll apply these methods at TIOH. I like to dive into ideas during the holidays, and I'd like to dive into them with you. A brief highlight of each community. The first is the one my friend Rabbi Holtzman leads in Northern Virginia. They had to decide whether or not to join a political rally in Washington, D.C. The congregation leans left, and this rally was in line with that. They had plenty of popular support for going, but Rabbi Holtzman knew that simply renting the buses to go would deepen polarization and leave some members feeling excluded. So he created a process for discussion and decision-making. In the end, they rented the buses, they went to D.C. But the people who disagreed felt heard. They respected the decision and even supported it. A cornerstone of their process is a type of convening. It's more than a town hall. It includes ritual, music, Jewish text that models a multiplicity of opinions, and deep listening. The centerpiece is when congregants tell stories about the issue at hand and how it has affected them personally. And after each story, everyone responds with complete silence, except for one word, shamati. I heard you. Let's pause on that for a minute. This practice is completely antithetical to how dialogue takes place in the public square. Can you imagine a political conversation in which the only thing that an opponent says to you is shamati? Can you imagine hearing the story of someone with whom you disagree and saying, shamati, I heard you? Could that become our public square? The second community is B'nai Jeshurun, BJ, in New York City. About 10 years ago, the rabbis issued a statement on Israel. While many in the community applauded the position, others took deep offense. Longtime members resigned and accused the rabbis of tearing the Jewish people apart. They decided to apply what Amanda Ripley calls a fourth way. In any high conflict situation, we typically consider three choices: fight, flight, or go silent. And indeed, the senior rabbi considered leaving BJ. He thought about standing his ground until everyone who disagreed left, and he thought about keeping his mouth shut, no longer sharing his beliefs on Israel and other controversial issues. But knowing that disagreement is necessary for growth, he chose a fourth way instead. They hired mediators and met in groups of about 40 people over several months. The community learned how to create conditions for conflict resilience, an ability to not just absorb conflict, but grow stronger from it. They went through a similar process when the rabbis considered changing a controversial internal synagogue policy, and then they took these methods that they had learned to enter into conflict deeply, calmly, respectfully, and honorably. They took those methods to a group of people with whom they had a much more potentially toxic disagreement. BJ developed a relationship with a community in rural Michigan. Many participants there worked as corrections officers in a local prison. They were mostly Christian. Some had never met a Jew. They were politically conservative, and most of them had voted for Trump. When they gathered, the New Yorkers expected to be met with bigotry. The Michiganders expected condescension, and both were surprised. The ground rules included, we're going to take seriously the things that everyone holds dear, we're not going to try to convince each other that they're wrong, and we're going to be curious. You can read about the exchanges they had. Did they change anybody's vote? I don't know. But a BJ congregant working on reforming the criminal justice system realized for the first time that corrections officers could be partners, not enemies, in that process. And when the horrific shooting occurred at the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh, 3 of the Michiganders got on a plane to attend Shabbat services at BJ, where they read a long and powerful letter of support, demanding better from our country. They said, "We must stop this before America stops being America." I want us to sharpen each other. We'll all be better for it. I want us to rail passionately against the injustices in our system. And at the very same time, I want us to listen, tolerate disagreement, and embrace good and healthy conflict. Let's start by reading these stories together. You can link to them on our website, and there are 100 copies of this book in the lobby if you want to take one home right now. We'll talk about it at Tuesdays with Mari on October 18th, and I know I just told you to come to the Social Justice Symposium on the 19th, which you should do. We will be talking about democracy from 2 different angles, 2 nights in a row. Because while I don't know if Mike is right, that synagogues can save American democracy, it sure seems worth a try. You know, some of the things that those teaching about reducing polarization call for, long-term thinking, taking time and creating space, complicating the narrative, those are in our wheelhouse. I mean, we've literally been talking about the fact that chickens don't produce milk and what that means for keeping kosher for 2,000 years. We know how to go deep. So here's to synagogues and churches and mosques and community centers and clubs and affinity groups that are learning how to get along and make decisions and navigate a world that is changing day by day, sometimes second by second. Here's to all those working to build communities that are safe and healthy and thriving and strong and open-minded and values-driven and inspiring and chock full of disagreement. Let's be sure we're on that list. Shana Tova.